Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Chana Davis from Those Nerdy Girls, and I'm here today with Lori Robertson, Managing Editor at factcheck.org. Our goal for today's session is to equip you, our audience, with the tools to fact check on your own. And we're going to be helping you by working through some examples and sharing some practical tips and resources. So we will do our best to monitor the chat, but we probably can't cover everything that comes up in the chat. So please submit your questions afterwards for consideration for future posts. Lori, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So why don't we start with a bit of an introduction to factcheck.org, since we've got two different audiences that are not necessarily familiar with these organizations. So what is your mission and how do you do the work that you do?
Sure. Well, factcheck.org is a project of the Annenberg Public Policy Center at the University of Pennsylvania. We launched in 2003, so we just celebrated our 20th anniversary last year. And we are a nonpartisan, nonprofit consumer advocate for voters that aims to reduce the level of deception and confusion in US politics. We have 9 full-time journalists on staff, and we monitor the factual accuracy of what politicians say, primarily at the federal level. And we also have a project called SciCheck that we launched in 2015. That we have a team of 3 science writers on SciCheck, and SciCheck focuses on false or misleading claims about science, obviously. And those could be statements by politicians as well, and also things that are spreading rapidly through social media. We also have a partnership with Meta to reduce the spread of misinformation and disinformation on that platform, as well as Instagram. And our stories also provide context and more information about claims that people are seeing on social media. Our goal basically is to increase public knowledge and understanding. And you can also find our work with SciCheck available in Spanish on our website. So Chana, would you tell me a little bit about your mission and the work that Those Nerdy Girls do?
Absolutely. So we are also nonpartisan. We're also nonprofit. I would say, our allegiance is to science and evidence first and foremost. We are focused on separating fact from fiction and on navigating today's complex information environment. So a lot of overlap with what you do. We have a dual mission. First, we want to help our readers to make informed health decisions by providing practical and factual information, but we also want to build our readers' confidence in navigating health information and sharing their knowledge with others. So it's a bit of giving fish and a bit of teaching to fish. Our vision is a world in which everyone has the tools and the confidence to make informed, evidence-based health decisions. We were founded in 2020 during the beginning of the pandemic, when some of us just kind of organically came together to help answer questions from the public about the pandemic. And it's grown and evolved a lot over the last 4 years. We now have a broader scope that includes health topics beyond COVID, and also this health literacy theme. In general, we focus on information problems, and it is still a very much volunteer-driven organization. So now that we've got that background aside, let's jump into some of the work that you do. And I think examples are always a great way to really illustrate this. So let's talk through, maybe for starters, the new COVID guidelines, because I know you have an article on that, and that is certainly a timely topic that there's a lot of maybe confusion about.
Exactly. So one of the other things we do is answer questions from readers. We have a project called, or a feature rather, called Ask SciCheck. And we encourage questions. So if people out there have questions, please send them to us, and maybe we'll answer your question in a future story. So we had a question from a reader asking, is 1 day of isolation enough after getting sick with COVID or testing positive for COVID to stop transmitting the disease to others? And this question was prompted by new CDC guidance on respiratory viruses generally, including COVID, that was released on March 1st. So the answer to the reader's question is probably not. You're probably going to be contagious well after 1 day of isolation. And this was prompted by some confusion over the new CDC guidance. The guidance did not say only isolate for 1 day. Instead, what the guidance said was to isolate until you are fever-free and your symptoms are improving for at least 24 hours. And then at that point, you can go out and about, but take precautions for an additional 5 days. Precautions like using a good quality mask, like an N95 or KN95, or physical distancing, that kind of thing. So that 24-hour point from the CDC guidance got confused in some people's minds that, oh, I only have to isolate for 1 day and then I'm okay. But instead, isolate until you're fever-free and your symptoms are improving for at least 1 day, and then you can stop isolation, but still take some other precautions.
Yeah. So is it fair to say in this particular case, it's less about someone actively putting wrong information out there versus, and it's more example of just information that's commonly misinterpreted?
Yeah, this was more misinterpretation, but we did see some social media posts making claims like, oh, they're admitting COVID is not any worse than the flu.
Right.
So there was some, some distortion of the guidance, but primarily this article was clearing up some confusion on what the CDC was saying. And then we went into a lot more detail on, how long might you be contagious, and things are a little better now in terms of spreading the virus or people getting very sick because we've been vaccinated, or people have gotten COVID. So there's more immunity, throughout the community. So we explained some of those issues as well.
Yeah, I don't envy public health decision makers, because it's always a matter of trade-offs, right? I mean, you can extend the isolation period to 0% people are contagious, but there is a cost to that, societally, and productivity, and people at home, and kids at home, and so there's not a lot of appreciation for that.
Yeah, and I think people maybe didn't realize this is based on information. The CDC didn't just make up something that sounded good. This new guidance was based on looking at data from other countries that had similar recommendations, and then not seeing clear increases in transmission rates or hospitalization rates, and feeling like, okay, this seems like something that it would work okay.
And in fact, I'm in Vancouver, Canada, and we had that guidance shift quite a while ago. I feel like at least 6 months ago.
Before it was this blanket 5 days stay home, and now it's more symptoms based. It's probably still going to be 5 days for most people before their fever-free symptoms are improving, but it's more based on your symptoms and not just a number.
I did see a study that was looking at what were sort of going to be the implications of, under this guidance, what percent of people were going to escape, we're going to sort of be out there transmitting. And it is some percent, right? I don't remember the exact number, but that's the government has to balance that against, the cost of having everyone be home 5 days regardless.
Yeah.
So I dropped the link for that into the comments, into the chat. So that should show up on at least some of these streams. I'm not actually sure, because we're streaming on a few platforms where this link will come in, but we'll post this afterwards for those that want to see the links. Let's move on to talking about vaccine safety and safety monitoring in the databases, because those are rife with misinformation and deliberate, I think, misrepresentation.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the big kind of targets we've seen for misinformation has been something called VAERS. That's the acronym. It's called the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. And this is something that's run jointly by the CDC and the FDA. It's a government vaccine safety surveillance system, again, often used by people who are opposed to vaccination to make false claims or misleading claims, at least, about vaccine safety. So it's an early warning system that's used to identify potential safety concerns after the vaccines are rolled out to the public. But any reports made to VAERS are unverified. Basically, anyone is encouraged to report any health issue they have after getting vaccinated, whether or not they believe the vaccine caused the issue. So it's a bunch of reports on anything that happened after vaccination without any kind of verification that the issue was in any way related to the vaccine, or even that the event happened. And there's a famous example of how these reports to VAERS are not verified. There was a doctor who filed a report saying that a vaccine turned him into the Hulk. And that was available in VAERS. And it was not until somebody from VAERS called him and they talked about it. And VAERS said, "Can we take this down?" And he said, "Yeah, you can." It's, he did it on purposefully made a false report just to see, is this going to show up in the system? Mm-hmm. So, that's one of the misunderstandings about it, that these are reports of something that happened after vaccination, many of which could be purely coincidental. They're not necessarily caused by the vaccine. Mm-hmm. Also, healthcare workers and vaccine manufacturers are required to file certain reports. But the CDC and the FDA use this to see if they notice any kind of unusual patterns. And if some kind of rare side effect, some kind of pattern shows up, they can then investigate that further and determine if this is something that is related to the vaccine. And they have some other vaccine surveillance systems that they can then use to, look further into that issue.
Yeah, so the system is highly sensitive. It sort of casts a very broad net, but it's not very specific in what's allowed to be in that net.
Exactly. And they kind of want the wide net, that enables them to see if there are these rare issues. But then more steps need to be taken to look into that. But, I think that description makes it pretty evident that this can really be misconstrued or misrepresented by anyone who wants to say, "Oh, look, X number of people had this problem because of the vaccine," and that's not what this database is showing. They're unverified reports purposefully casting this wide net, and then if there are some kind of unusual issues, then the CDC and the FDA can look into that further.
Yeah, this whole discussion is an opportunity to highlight, I think, a couple of common fallacies, I guess, and one is that if event B happened after event A must have caused it, right? That's I forget, that's called the temporal fallacy. There's names for some of these common fallacies, and that's something that the Nerdy Girls does, is talks about these types of fallacies. And another one that's sort of related is this correlation causation. If two things trend in the same direction, one must have caused the other. That's absolutely not true. So it's just, but you have to really catch yourself, because it's pretty easy to make these assumptions, because we're wired to look for patterns, right? And so it's understandable, but there's also this whole nefarious side, I guess, to this discussion of people having an agenda and pulling out data in a certain way. This also brings up for me a common fallacy of not paying attention to what's called the base rate, right? So if you're seeing, let's say, allergic reactions, or maybe that's not a great example, but you're seeing, let's say miscarriages or something. It's like, well, miscarriages happen at a certain rate independent of vaccination. So if you see a certain number of people that had a miscarriage after they were vaccinated, you absolutely can't conclude that unless you understand how commonly it normally happens in that population. So we've talked about that concept as well a lot in those Nerdy Girls, this base rate, and understanding that, people develop MS, like that happens at a certain rate at a certain age group. So if you see MS amongst vaccinees, you just can't assume that. So there's a lot of material there for understanding common fallacies.
Yeah, exactly. Like deaths reported to VAERS after vaccination. Well, a certain number of people are going to die of something, right, after they've been vaccinated, because it was just going to happen, and it's coincidental, not a causation.
Mhm.
I know on one of the stories that we did, looking into some deaths that were reported, one was somebody died in a car crash. Well, quite obviously that was not
Mhm.
related. Yeah, so that's just some of the ways that that the VAERS system
Right.
distorted.
Right. That just reminded me that in the one of the vaccine trials with children, somebody swallowed a penny, and that was reported as an adverse event in the trial. And it was just like a great way to illustrate it's absolutely insane to assume that the vaccine caused the child to eat the penny, and yet it was actually noted as a serious adverse event in the trial.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I did a little post on that, a little Instagram post on that. Um, so why don't we move on and talk about mRNA vaccines in cancer, because that's another area rife with misinformation.
Yeah, this is something we've seen a lot of, particularly recently. There's no evidence that the mRNA vaccines for COVID are causing cancer, but we keep seeing this claim spreading on social media. And just to clarify, mRNA vaccines for COVID, those are the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines. So, some people have tried to link cancer to the vaccine manufacturing process. It gets very technical, and we have a pretty technical article about this on our website. There are very tiny amounts of DNA that may remain in the vaccines after the vaccine manufacturing process. And various experts told us it's unlikely that any residual DNA in the vaccines could integrate into your DNA or cause cancer, even in theory. This theory that people have spread on social media relies on this improbable series of events all happening. And our article goes pretty in depth to explain this theory and why it's so unlikely.
Mm. Yeah, well, I'll just add to that. I'm a geneticist by training, so I did my PhD in, and I can absolutely vouch for the sort of ludicrousness, is that a word? The implausible nature of that claim. And I don't think there's an appreciation for the fact that DNA is in our food. Like you eat an apple, you're eating DNA. I mean, we're just consuming DNA constantly, and it's just such a leap to think that DNA might actually integrate into your genome. So, anyways, absolutely vouching for that story. We've written about that as well, those nerdy girls. Yeah, it's a shame it's a shame there isn't enough fundamental understanding of biology that it would be immediately obvious that that's implausible. But
yeah, I think people hear certain words and it
yeah,
just triggers a fear or a reaction. But if you take the time to look into it more and read more about it, you would have a different view.
yeah, absolutely. Fear is a very common strategy for spreading misinformation. It's that's how you get the clicks, and that's how you get the reactions, right?
Exactly.
So, well, thank you for sharing those examples. I wanted to kind of step back a bit and talk, more generally about how, tips for fact checking. What your process is and how the general public can employ some of the same strategies to do their own fact checking.
Sure. Yeah, so one of the first things we do is identify what is the source of the claim. And I think that's definitely something important for people to do if they're fact checking something on their own. If you see a claim about something, ask, well, what's the source of that, or what's the support for that? And then look into that support a bit. We find often when we find the supposed support for the claim, it does not really support the claim that's being made. Sometimes it is something that's based on an actual legitimate piece of research, but they have distorted what that research found. Other times it's based on some very low quality research or something that was published deceptively, and that's the source of it. Other times you may find that you just can't even find the source of it, like a claim that was completely fabricated. So that's one of the main things to think about, who is saying this, what is the source, what is the support, and to look a little further into that. Another big thing we do is talk to experts, and it's important to get subject matter experts. So, reaching out to, we're not just reaching out to anyone who's a doctor. We're reaching out to someone who's immunologist, or just depending on what the story is, somebody that has a specific expertise in what we're looking into. So that's another thing, that if you were looking at what people are saying online, what are this person's qualifications, and should they be speaking on this particular topic? And then we also go to trusted publications. So that may be the scientific literature, government websites like the CDC, the FDA. We're looking for expert guidelines. Maybe that comes from the American Medical Association, or another specific, medical group, depending on what the topic is. Maybe we're looking at news websites or other publications that have a strong track record. And then, of course, I would tell people, please come to factcheck.org. We may have fact checked whatever it is you're looking at, or something similar to what you're seeing. And, we've done all this. This does take time. So, fact checking things on your own, it takes time, and it's not easy. So we're being paid to do that work. So come to our website and see if we've looked into this already.
Yeah, I've certainly just, in my daily life and talking to friends, encountered, people being misled by each of those things you talked about. The source of the claim, commonly it's just an anecdote from a friend, or it might be a study. And as you said, a study is really not specific enough, because there's a huge variation in quality across studies. And then, an MD or a PhD is really not specific enough if that person isn't really familiar with this particular subject area. One of the things that, for those nerdy girls, when we write our posts, our go-to is often, is there a national organization? Is there an international organization? And is there consensus across the different organizations on, for example, writing about GMOs and glyphosate? You want to look at leading international and national organizations and see if they all agree, or if there's a professional organization, a consensus statement, for example, on menopause therapy, looking across an organization that's, relevant physicians in that space. That's where I like to, kind of use as my starting point. But there's just not always enough awareness that those exist as really kind of easy resource to wrap your head around the subject area expert consensus.
Yeah, exactly. And, the other difficult thing is that it's easy to make a false claim that could be one sentence. And then explaining what that's based on, why the thing it's based on isn't right, or, why this has been misconstrued, takes several paragraphs. So it kind of puts fact checking almost at a disadvantage. Because it's so easy to say something that's wrong. It takes more work to kind of dig into, like, okay, where did it come from? Why is this incorrect?
Yeah, we really encourage people to also basically internally fact check, to think about the possibility that you have a cognitive bias or something about the way you're processing the information that might make you more amenable to absorb it, or less amenable, and that might not align with the actual reality.
Yeah, we say that a lot too. If you kind of have this like automatic reaction, automatically outraged or something, well, stop, think a bit. Did this, post or video or whatever it is you're seeing kind of prey upon your preconceived notions? And, spend a little more time looking into it. So Chana, you guys also do some work with increasing literacy skills among readers, which is some of what we're talking about, kind of being better consumers of information that's out there. Could you talk a little more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I've alluded to some of these things earlier, but I'll just expand a bit on what the kind of stuff that we do at those Nerdy Girls. So, like I said, we have specific Q&A, posts about a health-related question about COVID or women's health, aging. We have a variety of topics, but we also have what we call the data literacy squad. So we're organized by squads, and I'm part of the data literacy squad. And our objective is to the whole teach them to fish concept, where we want to teach readers, listeners, to navigate our complex information environment, and so they can be more confident in the decisions they make, and serve as resources for others. So the types of tools that we try to equip people with, one is understanding factors that can impact our ability to process information, or the way that we process information. So we've alluded to that. That could be logical fallacies. For example, just this leap from an anecdote to a general conclusion, like overgeneralizing something you've seen, or it could be a cognitive bias. For example, I believe that redheads are bad drivers. And so whenever I see a redhead that does a poor move, I think, see, I'm right. And then I ignore all the redheads who are driving really well. I just don't notice that. So we talk about these, that's called what's the confirmation bias. So we have various posts about these different biases. We have various posts about different logical fallacies and why we can't conclude, from a given evidence that something is a fact. We also give general tips for just navigating information, like how to use keyword searches effectively, just general principles about the information environment, like the fact that data voids may exist once new information comes out. And then the third pillar is making sense of scientific studies and some concepts that you need to do that. A little more sophisticated things like, what is statistical significance or p-values? What's the difference between hazard and risk? When you're looking at a test, what's the difference between sensitivity and specificity and false positives and false negatives? Some of these concepts that really help you make sense of scientific studies and media headlines. And in fact, right now we have almost 60 posts in that data literacy category, and we are still growing. So shout out to the rest of the data literacy squad, which is led by Rupa, who has a PhD in stats, and Amanda, who has a PhD in epi and an MPH. So we've got a lot of great expertise on the team, and we're all just love nerding out about this stuff and sharing it with others. Once you have these things on your radar, you catch yourself doing them and you catch others doing them, and it's actually a lot of fun.
Oh, well, that sounds great. I know reading scientific studies, it's not as easy as people think. They can easily be misinterpreted, accidentally. So those sound like fantastic tools for everyday people.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to see how we're doing for time here. We are at 11:20. Only 3 minutes left. Okay, so we should probably wrap up and just let people know where to get more from each of us, and any last tidbits you wanted to add before we sign off. So how can our listeners stay in touch with FactCheck and SciCheck?
They could visit our website, factcheck.org. You'll see the SciCheck stories there. If you're really only interested in SciCheck, you can go to scicheck.org, and that'll take you to those stories. We have a weekly email newsletter. You'll see on our website where you can sign up for that. So you could get on Friday morning a newsletter that runs through what we did that week, and some other information about how we get our facts and interesting kind of facts of the week. So you can get that kind of information. And then you can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on X, formerly known as Twitter. And then again, if you have a question about a scientific topic, we would love to get your questions. We really like doing the Ask SciCheck features. And that email address is askscicheck@factcheck.org.
All right.
And what about those nerdy girls? Tell us how we can access your information.
Well, similarly, those nerdy girls are also on a lot of different platforms. So our website is an easy place to go that has links to all the other places, because we are on social. It's also a place you can go to subscribe and to submit to our question box. And we also are really encouraging people to sign up for our newsletter, which we have on Substack, and that's at thosenerdygirls.substack.com. But you can find that link through our website as well if you click on the subscribe button. So,
You also have some really cute merch on your site,
oh, thank you.
particularly for, babies, future nerdy girls. So
Yeah, those are cute. I also love some of my nerdy girl mugs and kind of quipping about data, and they're really, yeah, those are some of my favorites. But yeah, there's a lot there. So thank you for putting in a plug for that.
you're welcome.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad we were able to connect, and because I know that our audience can benefit a lot from what FactCheck is doing, and I hope the reverse is true as well.
Definitely.
Yeah. So thank you for taking the time today, and I hope our readers will go check out FactCheck and SciCheck, and check out all the great information and resources that you guys have put so much time into.
Well, we really appreciate. Thanks for having us on this video, Facebook Live, whatever I call it. Yeah, conversation.
All right. Yes, to be continued. All right. That's it for now. Thanks again. Bye, Lori.
Bye.